The merchant's fist came down on the wooden counter so hard that the jars of dried beans rattled against each other, and one tipped sideways and rolled off the edge and shattered on the dirt floor. I said, "Get away from my stall." His name was Gerald Potts, and he had the kind of voice that carried, the kind that made men on the other side of the market square stop walking and turn around to look. He was not a large man, but he understood power, and right now the power was entirely his, and he was enjoying every second of it. Evelyn Carter did not move. She should have. Every sensible part of her knew she should step back, put her hands down, stop drawing attention to herself the way she always had, the way survival had taught her. But her son Noah was standing at her elbow with his fingers curled around the hem of her coat, and her daughter Lily was just behind her, and both of her children had not eaten anything since yesterday morning, except for half a biscuit they had split between them without complaint. And Evelyn Carter was 34 years old, and she had been surviving on the edge of nothing for 2 years, and something in her had simply stopped being afraid of men like Gerald Potts. "I have money," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Not enough for all of it, but enough for the bread and the smaller sack of cornmeal. I showed you the coins." "You showed me 11 cents. Gerald's lip curled. "You want bread, meal, and 2 apples for 11 cents. You know what I call that?" He looked around. A few people nearby had drifted closer, the way people do when they sense humiliation on its way. "Begging," he said loudly for the crowd. "Dressed up as shopping." Someone laughed. Evelyn heard it but did not look for the source. She kept her eyes on Gerald because she had learned that the moment you looked away from men like him was the moment they felt they had won. "My children are hungry," she said. Just that. Not a plea. A statement of fact. Gerald leaned forward over the counter, and his voice dropped, not in kindness, but in the specific cruelty of a man who wants only the person in front of him to hear what he says next. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you dragged 2 kids across the territory with nothing to your name. That's not my problem, woman. And if you don't move yourself away from my stall right now, I'm going to call for the deputy and have you removed from this market. You understand me?" Noah pressed tighter against Evelyn's side. She felt his small shoulder against her ribs, felt him trying not to make a sound. Lily, behind her, had gone completely still. Evelyn placed her 11 cents on the counter, slowly, 1 coin at a time. "Then I'll take what 11 cents will buy," she said. Gerald Potts swept the coins off the counter with one swipe of his hand. They scattered into the dirt. "Now you've got nothing," he said. "Walk away." The market had gone quiet in that particular way that meant everyone had stopped pretending not to watch. Evelyn stood there with the heat of every stare pressing against the back of her neck. She could feel the shape of the moment, the way it would live in her children's memories, the way Lily would file it away in the part of her mind that kept score of every time an adult had failed to protect them, the way Noah would try to understand it and not quite be able to. She bent down and started picking up those coins. Nobody helped her. A few people looked away. One woman whispered something to the man beside her, and Evelyn heard the word widow and the word foolish, and she kept her face aimed at the ground and found 6 of the 11 cents before she heard a different sound. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming to a stop beside her. A pair of worn boots. Dark leather, dry at the toes, one heel slightly more scuffed than the other. A hand came down and picked up the last 5 coins before she could reach them. Evelyn stood up. The man standing beside her was not remarkable to look at, not at first. He was somewhere in his 40s, lean in the way that came from actual work rather than intention, with a jaw that needed a shave and eyes that were a quiet pale gray and revealed almost nothing. He was dressed like a rancher, which meant he was dressed like half the men in this market, except that he stood like someone who was not in a hurry and had not been in a hurry for a long time. He placed the 5 coins back in Evelyn's hand without looking at her. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded bill, and set it on Gerald Potts's counter with a flat, deliberate movement that somehow managed to be louder than anything Gerald had done. "Give her the bread," he said, "and the cornmeal, and the 2 apples." Gerald Potts stared at him. "Now, Caleb, I didn't ask you a question, Gerald." The silence that followed had a different texture than the one before. Gerald Potts picked up the bill. His face had gone through several arrangements and settled on something that was not quite shame and not quite anger, but lived in the uncomfortable territory between them. He got the bread, he got the cornmeal, he got the 2 apples, and he set them on the counter without another word. The man, Caleb, took the items and handed them to Evelyn. Then, for the first time, he actually looked at her. He didn't look at her the way Gerald had, measuring what she lacked. He didn't look at her the way the crowd had, hungry for the next part of the spectacle. He just looked at her, the way you look at someone when you're trying to see them clearly and you have no particular agenda about what you find. "I have more room at my table," he said, "than I have people to share it with." That was it. That was all he said. No offer of salvation, no promise of anything. Just a plain statement about a table and empty chairs, and somehow it was the most dignity anyone had offered Evelyn Carter in 2 years, and she had to press her teeth together for a moment before she could answer him. "We're not charity cases," she said. "I can see that." He picked up the bag of cornmeal because it was the heaviest. "You coming or not?" If you've ever stood in a market with empty hands and hungry children while someone counted your worth in coins and found it insufficient, if you've ever felt the weight of a crowd watching you struggle and choosing to watch instead of help, then you already understand exactly what Evelyn Carter was feeling in that moment. This story is for every person who has ever been told they were too much trouble, who has ever had to bend down and pick their dignity up off the floor in front of strangers, who has ever had someone appear at exactly the wrong moment and do the exact right thing for no reason they could immediately explain. Before we go any further, if this kind of story speaks to you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Because this channel is built for people who know that the most important human stories are the ones that begin in the hardest places. And drop your city or your country in the comments below, because I want to know how far this story has traveled. Every comment you leave tells me someone, somewhere, is still listening. Now let's go back to Evelyn. Potts. She didn't know, walking away from Gerald Potts' stall with her children behind her, and a stranger's cornmeal in the back of his wagon, that this moment was the pivot on which the rest of her life would turn. She thought she was accepting a meal. Maybe a night or two of shelter if she was fortunate. She was not a woman who built plans on kindness, because kindness in her experience had always been a transaction with terms that revealed themselves later, usually at the worst possible time. But she was also a woman who had run out of alternatives. Evelyn Carter had started running 2 years ago, about 3 weeks after her husband Martin had died of a fever that moved faster than any doctor they could reach. They had been farming a small claim outside of Harrisburg. Nothing much, 20 acres of mediocre land and a house that needed more work than they ever had time to give it. Martin had been the one who understood the land. Evelyn had understood the books, the accounts, the careful management of what little they had. When Martin died, she discovered that what little they had was less than she knew. There were 2 debts she hadn't been told about, not out of deception, she believed, but out of the particular kind of optimism that convinced men that tomorrow would be better and that the debts could be handled before they needed to be discussed. The creditors did not share Martin's optimism. They arrived within 6 weeks of his burial, and the claim was gone within 10. She had packed what fit in the wagon. The children were 5 and 8 at the time. Noah was 5, small for his age and prone to nightmares. Lily was 8 and had her mother's jaw and her father's stubborn streak, and she had watched the men come to take their house with the particular stillness of a child who is cataloging an injustice she intends never to forget. They had drifted since then. Evelyn did washing, mending, whatever work she could find in whatever town they stopped in. She was good with numbers and had spent 4 months as a bookkeeper for a general store in Caldwell before the owner's brother arrived needing the position, and Evelyn was thanked for her service and shown the door. She had done a season of work in a laundry in a place called Reedy Creek that had nearly broken her hands, and she had worked as a seamstress for 3 months for a woman named Mrs. Hollis, who had eventually decided she couldn't afford the extra wages. In 2 years, she had moved 11 times. Noah had adapted the way younger children adapt, by attaching himself to whatever stability existed, which right now was primarily his mother and his sister. He was 7 now, and had a talent for reading people that was unusual in a child his age. He knew when adults were lying. He knew when places were safe and when they weren't, though he could not have explained how he knew. He had learned not to ask too many questions about where they were going next, because asking seemed to make his mother's shoulders go up around her ears. Lily was 10, and she had made of herself a wall. It had happened gradually. The first time it happened, when the men came and took the house, she had cried. Not in front of the men, not even in front of Evelyn, but Evelyn had found her in the wagon after everything was loaded, pressed against the corner with her knees drawn up and her face wet. Evelyn had held her for a long time and not said anything useful because there was nothing useful to say. After that, Lily stopped crying. Not because she stopped feeling things, but because she had decided, in the very deliberate way she made decisions, that feeling things was a resource she could not afford to waste. She tested every adult she encountered before she allowed herself to rely on them, with a methodical thoroughness that would have been remarkable in someone twice her age. She had tested the store owner in Caldwell. She had tested Mrs. Hollis. She had tested the woman in Reedy Creek who managed the laundry. All of them had eventually failed the test, which Lily had expected, but which hadn't made it less hard each time. Now she walked behind her mother toward a stranger's wagon, carrying the 2 apples against her chest, watching the back of this man named Caleb with the particular expression she wore when she was already building the case against someone. "Is his ranch far?" Noah asked quietly, walking beside his mother. "I don't know." "Are we staying there?" "I don't know that either." "Oh." A pause. "Okay." That was Noah. He had an extraordinary capacity for accepting the unknown, which Evelyn suspected was either a gift or a sign that he had simply stopped expecting the future to be predictable. She wasn't sure which one was better. The wagon road out of town was rutted and dry. Caleb Dawson sat up front and drove without much conversation, which Evelyn appreciated. She had endured too many journeys in strangers' company where the stranger felt entitled to her story. Where had she come from? Where was she going? What happened to her husband? Why was she alone? As though tragedy was a kind of debt that obligated disclosure. Caleb asked her nothing. He did ask the children, eventually. About 20 minutes into the drive, without turning around, he said, "Either of you ever been on a working ranch?" Noah said no, but very quickly. Lily said nothing. "You'll see cattle," Caleb said, "and horses. If you stay long enough, you might see a foal being born. I've got a mare that's been carrying about 10 months. He said it casually, like information, not like a sales pitch. "What's a foal?" Noah asked. "Baby horse?" "Oh." Another pause, this one filled with the sound of wheels on dry ground. "Does it hurt? For the horse?" Caleb thought about this for a moment, which Evelyn noticed. He didn't just produce the easy answer. "Some," he said, "but she's done it before. She knows what to expect." Noah appeared to find this satisfactory. Lily said nothing, but she had stopped looking at the back of Caleb's head with the same aggressive assessment and started looking at the landscape instead, which, for Lily, was something close to relaxation. The first sight of Caleb's land came around a long curve in the road, and it was not what Evelyn had expected. She had pictured something prosperous, a man who threw money down on market counters without flinching. She had clocked the size of that bill. It was more than she made in 2 weeks of laundry work, and who owned a ranch should have owned something that reflected that. She had built a quiet, careful expectation of a house with a proper porch and fields that showed signs of management. What she saw instead was land that was tired. The fields stretched out on either side of the road, large and real and unmistakably once productive, but the soil at the edges was pale and cracked in a way that told its own story. The fences were maintained. They were not falling down. Every post was in the ground and every wire was taut. But the maintenance had the quality of stubbornness rather than ease, like a man who kept things standing through sheer refusal to let them fall. The house was solid. 2 stories, good timber, a porch that ran the full length of the front. But it needed paint, and the steps on the left side of the porch were darker than the others, recently replaced and not yet matching, and the window on the upper right had a crack running diagonally across the lower pane that had been sealed with some kind of resin that had dried brown. It was, Evelyn thought, the house of a man who was fighting something. She didn't yet know what. Caleb pulled the wagon around to the side of the house, near a barn that was in somewhat better condition than everything else, and climbed down without any ceremony. "Kitchen's through the back," he said. "There's a room off the east side of the house. It's not much, a bed and a cot, but it's clean. You're welcome to it for as long as you need." Evelyn climbed down with the children. She looked at him. "What do you expect in return?" she asked. Because she had to know. Because there was always something. Caleb looked at her steadily, that quiet, measuring look she had first noticed in the market. "Nothing," he said. "That's not how the world works." "Might be how it works here." He picked up the bag from the back of the wagon. "Come on, I'll show you where things are." The kitchen was warm, and it smelled like coffee that had been sitting on the stove too long, and wood smoke, and the particular dusty sweetness of a space where someone had been living alone for a while. There was a table large enough for 6 people, and only one chair showed signs of regular use, the one at the far end, worn at the armrests, and with a slight forward lean from years of a specific person sitting in it a specific way. There was a woman already in the kitchen. She was older, perhaps 60, with silver hair in a tight braid, and the kind of face that had been weathered by decades of outdoors and had arrived on the other side of it looking absolutely unbothered. She was stirring something on the stove and did not appear surprised to see Evelyn or the children, which meant Caleb had known he was going to do this before he'd done it, which raised the first genuine question mark in Evelyn's mind about who this man was. "This is May," Caleb said. "She looks after the place. May, this is—" He paused and looked at Evelyn because he had never asked her name. "Evelyn Carter," she said. "My children. Noah. Lily." May looked at both children with an expression that was not sentimental, but was warm in the way that a fire in a fireplace is warm. Steady, reliable, not trying to be anything other than what it was. "Sit down," May said. "All of you. There's stew." Lily looked at the stew like she was trying to find what was wrong with it. Noah sat down immediately. Dinner was the first real meal Evelyn's children had eaten in 2 days, and she watched them eat with the complicated combination of relief and grief that parents understand. The relief that they were fed, the grief that they had been hungry long enough that eating slowly was no longer something either of them remembered how to do. Caleb ate at his usual chair and said very little. May moved around the kitchen with the efficiency of long habit. After a while, when the bowls were empty and Noah's eyes were starting to lose focus, in the way that meant he would be asleep within minutes, May showed them to the east room. It was small, but it had 2 beds, not one, and a cot, and both mattresses were decent. There was a window that looked out toward the barn. The floor was wood and clean. There was a small dresser with a lamp on it. Evelyn put Noah down first, and he was asleep before she had finished pulling the blanket over him. She turned to find Lily standing in the center of the room, arms crossed, looking at her. "We're not staying," Lily said. Not a question. "I don't know yet. You always say that, and then we end up staying just long enough for it to matter, and then we leave, and it's worse than if we'd never stopped." Evelyn sat down on the edge of the other bed. The words hit exactly where Lily intended them to hit, which was a skill her daughter had been honing since she was about 8 years old. "You might be right," Evelyn said. "I know I'm right." "Okay." Lily stared at her. "That's it? Okay? What do you want me to say, Lily?" "I want you to say we're leaving tomorrow, before it gets complicated." Evelyn looked out the window. She could see lamplight in the barn and the silhouette of someone moving, Caleb probably checking on the animals before he slept. "I don't have anywhere to take you," she said. "Not tonight. Not yet." The silence that came after that was not comfortable, but it was honest. And Lily, of all things, seemed to respect honesty more than comfort. She got into the bed without another word, still fully dressed, lying on her back with her arms at her sides, staring at the ceiling. "He'll show what he wants eventually," she said, to the ceiling. "They always do." Evelyn did not contradict her. She didn't have enough evidence yet to disagree. What? Morning on Caleb Dawson's ranch started early. Evelyn woke before the children to the sound of boots on the porch outside and went to the kitchen to find May already there and coffee already made, and Caleb already gone. "He's up by 4 most mornings," May said, setting a cup in front of Evelyn without asking if she wanted it. "Has been for years. Even when there's nothing particular that needs doing, he finds something." "Has he always ranched here?" "Built this place himself. 15 years ago it was just a piece of land and a plan. 15 years ago it was one of the better ranches in the county." May paused. Times got harder. The drought started 3 seasons back, and it's been a slow leak ever since. Evelyn wrapped her hands around the cup. "What does he do about it?" "Works harder," May said. "Cuts what he can cut. Holds what he can hold." She looked at Evelyn directly. "He's a stubborn man. It's his best quality and his worst one, depending on the day." "Why did he bring us here?" May seemed to consider whether to answer this and then decided she would. "Because he hasn't brought anyone home in a long time," she said simply. "And he walked past your situation 3 times at that market before he stopped. I know because he told me last night. He walked past twice and talked himself out of it both times. She picked up her coffee. The third time, your little boy was trying to peel bark off a post and eat it. Evelyn set her cup down. He didn't tell me that, she said. No, he wouldn't. She sat with that for a while. Outside, somewhere across the yard, she could hear someone moving. The sound of a gate, the stamp of a horse, a voice saying something low and even to an animal that couldn't answer back. The ordinary morning sounds of a working ranch. He needs help, May said, not quite looking at her. Not that he'd ask. That's the other thing about stubborn men. They'd rather go under than admit the waters reached their chin. Evelyn picked up her cup again. What kind of help? The accounts are a mess. He's been managing them himself since his last hand left, and he's got the organizational instincts of a man who was raised to do things with his hands, not his ledger. He's losing track of where money goes, and he's behind on 2 supplier accounts that he doesn't realize are compounding. May paused. I noticed you looked at the receipts on the counter when you came in last night. Evelyn had. She hadn't meant to make it obvious. They're not in order, Evelyn said. No, they're not. The one from the feed supplier. The date on that was 3 weeks ago. If he hasn't paid that account, the rate will have adjusted. I know. Does he know? May looked at her. He does now, she said. Or he will when you tell him. Noah found Caleb in the barn before breakfast. This was not surprising. Noah had a talent for finding the person in any new place who was most likely to answer his questions without talking down to him, and he had identified Caleb at dinner the night before with the same instinct that a dog uses to find the person in the room who genuinely likes dogs. Caleb was working on a section of fencing that had come loose from the barn wall, hammering with methodical patience when Noah appeared in the doorway. Good morning, Noah said. Caleb looked up. Morning. Can I watch? Nothing much to watch, just fixing fence. I know. Can I watch anyway? Caleb regarded him for a moment with the particular look of a man who is not used to the company of children, but is not opposed to it either. Sure, he said. Stay out of the way of the swing. Noah positioned himself about 4 feet to the left and watched Caleb work with the focused attention of a scientist observing a new phenomenon. Caleb hammered. The fence went back where it belonged. Do you have kids? Noah asked. No. Did you want them? The hammer paused for about half a second. That's a personal question, Caleb said. Sorry. Noah didn't sound particularly sorry, but he did sound genuine. My sister says I ask too many personal questions. Your sister might be right. She usually is, but she gets mad about it sometimes because she's also personal. She just doesn't want anyone to be personal back. He appeared to think about this. I think it's because things happen to us. Caleb set the hammer down and looked at Noah with an expression that had shifted from neutral to something more careful. What kind of things? He asked. Regular things, like losing our house and moving a lot and being hungry sometimes. Noah said this the way children say true things, without drama, without the emotional cushioning adults apply. Just the facts of it, laid out plainly. Lily thinks if you don't let things matter, they can't hurt you. What do you think? Noah considered. I think they hurt you anyway. You just don't know where it went. Caleb picked up the hammer again. He didn't say anything for a moment, and then he said, That's about the most accurate thing anyone said to me in a while. Really? Really? Noah appeared to file this away with satisfaction. He watched Caleb work for another few minutes. Is your horse going to have her baby soon? He asked. Could be any day. Can I see it when it happens? If you're up early enough. I'm always up early. My mom says I was born early, and I haven't stopped since. Something happened at the corner of Caleb's mouth that was not quite a smile, but was in the general vicinity of one. Then you'd better be paying attention, he said. Lily found the accounts on her own. She wasn't looking for them. She was doing what she always did in new places, moving through the space quietly, cataloging, assessing, building her picture of where the exits were and what the real story was underneath the surface story. She had developed this skill across 11 different stops in 2 years, and she had gotten very good at it. The accounts were in a wooden box on the shelf in what was clearly Caleb's working room, a small space off the main hall that held a desk, some shelving, and a lamp that tilted slightly to one side. The box was not locked. The papers inside were not organized. She did not open the box or touch it,
But she could see the top sheet because the box had been pushed aside and the lid was ajar, and Lily had her mother's eyes when it came to numbers. She stood there for about 30 seconds, reading what she could see. Then she closed the door and went to find her mother. She found her in the kitchen with May, and May had gone outside, and Evelyn was washing the breakfast dishes. "He's in trouble," Lily said. "Who?" "Him, Caleb. His ranch is in trouble." She said it without satisfaction, which was important. Lily sometimes delivered bad news about people with a small edge of vindication, but not this time. "There's a box of accounts in the room off the hall. I didn't touch it. But the top paper, it's a notice from a supplier association. They're threatening to close his credit accounts if he doesn't pay what he owes." Evelyn turned from the dishes. "How much?" "I couldn't see the full amount, but the date on the notice was 2 weeks ago." Evelyn dried her hands. "Did he see you looking at it?" "No. I didn't touch it," Lily said again, and her voice carried the specific firmness of someone who wants this point on the record. "I didn't open the box. I just saw." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. She was thinking about what May had said, about the accounts being a mess, about Caleb being a man who couldn't ask for help, about the way his ranch showed the signs of a slow fight against something he couldn't name or resolve on his own. "Okay," Evelyn said. "Okay." Lily looked at her. "That's it?" "I'm thinking." "We should leave," Lily said, "before we get mixed up in someone else's trouble. We have enough of our own." "I know we do." "But?" Evelyn looked out the kitchen window toward the barn, where she could see Caleb crossing the yard with a purposeful walk and no one to walk with. "But I'm good with accounts," she said quietly. "And if someone had helped us 2 years ago when we were going under, if someone had looked at the numbers before it was too late—" She stopped. Lily was watching her. "It's not the same," Lily said, but she said it without force. "No," Evelyn agreed. "It's not the same." She went back to the dishes. Lily stood there for another moment, and then she went to the room off the hall, stood in the doorway, and looked at the box with the expression she wore when she was being honest with herself about something she didn't want to be honest about. It was the expression she wore when she recognized something. She recognized this: the tired house, the good fences, the man who woke at 4 in the morning and worked himself without asking for help. She recognized a person trying to hold something together past the point when holding should have been possible. She didn't go in. She didn't touch the box. But she stopped building the case against Caleb Dawson for one afternoon, which, for Lily, was almost everything. By the end of that first day, Evelyn had made a decision, and it was not the decision she had expected to make when she woke up that morning. She went to Caleb in the early evening, when he came in from the far field, dusty and tired in the way that was different from being lazy tired, that specific weight of a person who has worked past their limit and done it anyway. "Your accounts," she said. "They're behind." He looked at her without expression. "I know." "You might not know how far behind. The supplier association notice, the one from 2 weeks ago." His eyes sharpened. "You went through my desk?" "No." She said it clearly. "I didn't touch anything. Your lid was open. My daughter has sharp eyes." She paused. I was a bookkeeper. Before all of this. I'm good with accounts, and I can see from the surface of what's there that you have a problem that is getting bigger faster than you're managing it." He was quiet. The evening light was going flat and orange around them, and somewhere in the barn, one of the horses made a sound that was just a sound. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "No arrangement, no trade. I know you said that, and I believe you meant it. But you helped my children today without a reason, and I'm good at something that might help you. And if you want me to look at the accounts, I'll do that." She held his gaze. "No obligation, no debt. You can say no." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "Breakfast is at 5:30, he said finally. "If you're going to be working on accounts, you'll want to be finished by mid-morning. May makes coffee strong enough to get you through the morning." He walked past her toward the house. Evelyn stood in the yard for a moment, looking after him. He hadn't said yes, but he hadn't said no. And at Caleb Dawson's ranch, on the edge of everything that was about to happen, that was enough to begin. The accounts were worse than Evelyn had thought. She had suspected bad. She had not suspected this.
She sat at Caleb's desk in the small room off the hall at 5 in the morning, with a lamp pulled close and a cup of maize coffee going cold at her elbow. And she went through every paper in that wooden box with the systematic patience she had developed over years of making other people's numbers tell the truth. She sorted first receipts from notices, from ledger entries, from correspondence, and that alone took 40 minutes because nothing had been filed in any order that she could identify. Not chronological, not categorical, not alphabetical. Just layered, the way things get layered when a person has been dealing with them one at a time, urgently, and then putting them down and moving on to the next urgent thing. When she had sorted, she started reading. The debt to the Supplier Association was larger than she had seen from the top sheet. There were 3 separate accounts, not one, and 2 of them had penalty clauses that had already activated. Small print that she had to hold the lamp close to read, the kind of small print that creditors rely on people not reading. The 3rd account was still within its grace period, but only by 11 days. Beyond the supplier accounts, there was a note on the property, not unusual for a ranch this size, and the rate was fair, but the last payment recorded was 4 months ago, and she could not find any record of payments since. Either Caleb had made them and lost the receipts, or he hadn't made them. She would need to ask, which meant she would need to tell him how far she had gone into the accounts, and she was not certain yet how he was going to receive that. There was also a letter from a man named Harlan Briggs. She read it twice. It was politely worded in the way that threats are sometimes politely worded by people who want to maintain the appearance of civility while delivering their message with complete clarity. Briggs represented the Cattlemen's Cooperative Association. She had heard the name in passing at the market, the way you hear the name of an organization that has become large enough to be unavoidable. The letter was 3 weeks old. It said, with great courtesy, that the association had concerns about the current performance of certain member ranches in the county, and that a review would be taking place regarding the allocation of shared cattle routes. It said that participation in the cooperative's transport arrangements was contingent on members maintaining standards of financial standing and community reliability. It said that Caleb Dawson's membership status was under review. What it meant, translated out of its courteous language, was that if Caleb couldn't get his finances in order and demonstrate standing in the community, the association could block him from using the shared routes that every ranch in the county depended on for moving cattle to market. Without those routes, he would have to pay private transport costs that would likely finish what the drought had started. Evelyn sat back. Outside, the ranch was just beginning to come alive with the sounds of early morning. The stamp of horses, the distant call of something she couldn't identify, boots on the porch steps that would be Caleb, who was never not already awake. She thought about what she was going to say to him. She thought about how he would hear it. She thought about the face he had made when she'd mentioned the accounts the evening before, not defensive exactly, but sealed. The face of a man who knows a thing is bad and has decided to deal with it by working harder at everything around it rather than at it directly. She understood that face. She had worn it herself. She found him at the fence line on the east side of the property, where the soil was driest and the posts showed the strain of ground that had been contracting and shifting through 3 years of drought. He was checking tension on the wire, moving from post to post, doing it the way he did most things, methodically, without complaint. She waited until she was close enough not to have to raise her voice. "I went through all of it," she said. He didn't stop moving. "How bad?" "I need you to stop for a minute." He stopped. He turned. He looked at her with that steady, unrevealing gaze and waited. She told him. All of it, in the order she had found it. The 3 supplier accounts, the penalty clauses, the note payments, the letter from Harlan Briggs. She did not soften any of it, because she had learned long ago that softened bad news was still bad news but slower, and slow bad news was almost worse because it gave the listener time to argue with it. She gave him the full picture, and she watched him take it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't flinch. He stood there with his arms at his sides and his jaw set and his eyes on the middle distance, listening. When she finished, there was a silence that lasted about 15 seconds, which is longer than it sounds. "The note payments," he said. "I made them. 3 months ago, all in a lump because I was behind. I didn't get receipts." He looked at the ground. "I didn't think about receipts." "Did you pay by cash?" "Yeah." "Then we don't have proof. If the lender claims you're still behind, we can't counter it without receipts." She paused. Did you go in person or send someone? In person, to the bank in Millhaven. Who handled it? He thought. Younger man, teller, don't know his name. If we go back, they might have a record on their end. Banks usually do. She looked at him. This is fixable. Some of it is fixable right now if you have the cash for the smaller supplier account. The one still in its grace period. If we pay that in the next 11 days, we stop the penalty from activating. How much? She told him. He looked at the ground again. I can get it, he said. I've been holding money back for the cattle purchase next month. I'd have to pull from that. If the supplier closes the account and you lose the credit line, you'll spend more in the long run than you save by keeping the cattle money. I know. He didn't sound argumentative. He sounded like a man doing arithmetic in his head and not enjoying what it was adding up to. The Briggs letter is the one I'm most concerned about, Evelyn said. The association. If they pull your root access, I know what it means. I figured you did. He was quiet again. A breeze came across the field from the east, carrying the dry, faint smell of parched earth. There's nothing I can do about Briggs, he said finally. That's not a money problem. That's a politics problem. Briggs has been pushing the smaller ranches out of the association for 2 years. He wants the routes consolidated in the hands of the bigger operations. I'm not the only one getting one of those letters. Who else? He looked at her. Why? Because if there are others in the same position, she said carefully, then it's not just your problem. And a shared problem is a different kind of thing to manage than a single one. Caleb studied her for a moment. You think about things in a particular way, he said. I think about things the way I learned to think about them, she said, from years of making do with less. He picked up the fencing tool from where he'd set it on the post and looked at it without really looking at it. There are 2 other ranchers, he said, Haskell, to the south, and the woman out on the ridge, Clara Meade. She inherited her husband's operation and she's been in Briggs's crosshairs since the day she took it over. He paused. I don't know what good it does, knowing that. Maybe nothing, Evelyn said. Not yet. She walked back toward the house. He watched her go with an expression she didn't see, something between wariness and the very first thin thread of something he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't sure what to name it. He went back to the fence. Noah decided that his primary purpose at the ranch, as far as he could tell, was to learn everything possible about horses, cattle, the organization of fence lines, and a man named Caleb Dawson. He went about this with the seriousness he brought to most things, which was the specific seriousness of a child who has spent enough time around adults managing difficult situations that he understood instinctively that being easy to have around was both a skill and a courtesy. He didn't run or make unnecessary noise near the animals. He asked before he touched anything. When Caleb showed him how to approach the horses, from the side, not from behind, letting them see you coming, he listened and repeated it back accurately, which he could tell from the way Caleb looked at him pleased the man, though Caleb did not say so in words. The mare, Caleb called her Bessie, which Noah found funny because it seemed like a name for a cow, was in the far stall, heavy and slow, and she turned to look at Noah when he appeared in the stall doorway with the dignified patience of an animal that has been through this before. You said she's done this before, Noah said. 3 times. Is she scared? Caleb considered. I think she's ready to be done with it. That's not the same as scared, though. No, Caleb said. It's not. Noah looked at Bessie, and Bessie looked back at Noah with her large brown eyes, and the exchange seemed to satisfy something in both of them. What happens to the foal after it's born? Noah asked. Stays with the mother for a while. Then, eventually, I'll either train it or sell it. Does it bother you, selling them? Caleb picked up a hay fork and moved to the next stall. Sometimes, he said, but you still do it. Ranch doesn't run on feelings. Noah thought about this. My mom says you have to know the difference between feelings that tell you something true and feelings that just tell you you're scared. Your mom said a lot in a day and a half. She thinks a lot, Noah said. She's quiet about it, but she's thinking the whole time. You can tell if you watch her eyes. Caleb did not respond to this, but there was a pause in his work that was noticeable. What happened to your dad? He asked, after a moment. It was Noah's turn to consider. He did it the way his mother did, without rushing, without performing. He died, he said. Fever. 2 years ago. He said it the way children sometimes say true hard things, with a directness that was not cruelty, but was not softness either, just the fact of it, standing alone. I remember him okay. Lily says she remembers him more, but I don't know if that's true or if she just thinks she should. Caleb set the fork down and looked at him. How old were you? 5. A beat. That's young, Caleb said. I know. Noah looked at a spot on the stall wall. Sometimes I get him mixed up with other men. Like I think I remember him doing something, and then I think maybe I just added that in. He paused. Is that bad? No, Caleb said. That's just memory. It's imperfect. Yours too? Mine too. Noah seemed to find this reassuring. He nodded once, the way he did when he had received an answer that confirmed something he'd already suspected, and went back to watching Bessie. The problem with Lily was that she was right about too many things. This was, she had come to understand, a significant social liability. She had known since she was about 7 that she perceived certain things more accurately than most of the adults around her, and she had learned, slowly and at some cost, that this was not always welcome information. People did not generally like to be understood by a child. They especially did not like to be understood by a child who was also angry. So she had learned to keep most of it to herself, which suited her fine because it also meant she didn't have to explain herself. She was in the barn on the second afternoon, sitting on a hay bale with no particular agenda, when Caleb came in. He saw her and did not say anything for a moment, just went to the workbench and started looking through the tools there. Lily watched him. You haven't asked us to leave yet, she said. No. He found what he was looking for, a particular wrench, and closed the toolbox. Why not? He turned to look at her. He did not seem surprised by the question. Why would I? Because that's usually what happens, she said. At first people are nice, and then something comes up. Then they need the space, or they can't afford extra, or they just decided it's not working. She said this without heat, just stating it. We've been at 7 different places in 2 years. 4 of them started out nice. Caleb put the wrench down. He sat on the other end of the workbench, not close, just not standing over her. That's a lot of places, he said. I know. What happened? At the ones that started nice? Different things. She looked at her hands. The woman in Reedy Creek, she liked my mom at first. Then my mom was better at her job than she expected, and she got weird about it. The man in Caldwell, his brother needed work, so we got pushed out for the brother. The family and... She stopped. It doesn't matter. It does, Caleb said. But you don't have to tell me. She looked at him sideways. You're doing that thing, she said. What thing? Where you're careful about what you say because you're worried about getting it wrong. He looked at her steadily. Is that a bad thing? No. She seemed almost surprised by her own answer. Most people just say whatever. They don't think about whether it's right. She went back to looking at her hands. My dad was like that. Careful. When did he die? 2 years ago. I'm sorry. You don't have to say that. I know. I said it anyway. Lily looked at him. He looked back. There was something in his face that she had been cataloging since they arrived. Something she had been trying to categorize and place in its proper drawer so she knew what to do about it. Now she thought she might know what it was. He was sad. Not in a surface way. In the deep, settled way that grief becomes after enough years. Not sharp anymore, just present, the way a scar is present. Permanent and changed, and not going away. She recognized it because she saw it sometimes in her own mother's face, and sometimes when she made herself look in the mirror. Did someone die here? She asked. On this ranch? The question landed differently than she intended it to, which she could see in the way his hands shifted on the workbench. Not pulling back exactly, but a change. Not on the ranch, he said, after a pause. Near here. She knew she was at the edge of something and also knew she should stop. She had enough of her own buried things not to dig up someone else's without permission. Okay, she said. Just that. He picked up the wrench again and turned it in his hands. You can ask me things, he said. If you need to know things. About this place. I'd rather you asked than guessed. Lily considered this for a moment. Are you going to lose the ranch? She asked. He was quiet for 3 full seconds. I don't know, he said. I'm trying not to. My mom can help with the accounts. I know. She's very good. She figured out in one morning what was wrong. She's better at it than most people. I know that too. Then why do you look like you're still deciding? He looked at her with an expression that was difficult to read for a moment, and then something shifted in it. Not amusement exactly, but something adjacent to it. Because, he said slowly, I'm not used to needing help. Neither is she, Lily said, but she's doing it anyway. She got down from the hay bale and walked to the door. That foal better come soon, she said, at the doorway, not looking back. My brother's going to drive everyone insane asking about it. She went back to the house. Caleb sat on the workbench for a moment, alone in the barn, with the quiet and the smell of hay and the sound of Bessie shifting in her stall. The town of Millhaven had opinions about Caleb Dawson's situation, and it was not long before those opinions found their way to Evelyn. She went with May on the third day to get supplies from the general store. Caleb had given her the cash for the supplier account, and she needed to send the payment, and May needed flour and lamp oil. It was a practical errand, and Evelyn was a practical woman, and she did not expect anything more from it. She got considerably more. The general store was run by a man named Orson Pruitt, who was friendly enough in the way of men who rely on everyone in a small community for their living and therefore cannot afford to be overtly unfriendly to anyone. But the store was occupied by two other women when Evelyn and May came in, a Mrs. Garfield and a woman whose name Evelyn did not catch, and they had the stillness of people who had just been talking about something and had stopped. May bought the flour and the lamp oil without engaging with the stillness. Evelyn sent the supplier payment through Orson, who wrote her out a receipt, which she folded carefully and put in her pocket because she now had very strong feelings about the importance of receipts. On the way out, Mrs. Garfield said, to no one in particular, but loud enough for the room, I hear Caleb Dawson took in a widow from the market. May kept walking. Evelyn stopped. She was aware that stopping was tactically questionable. She was aware that May was 3 steps ahead of her and would have kept going if she'd had the sense to follow. She was also aware, in the specific way of a person who has been talked about in market squares and waiting rooms and landlord offices for 2 years, that what was said in the next 30 seconds would become the version of her story that circulated in Millhaven. She turned around. He did, she said pleasantly. He's been very kind. Is there something you'd like to know? Mrs. Garfield's expression shifted through several arrangements. I'm sure he meant well, she said. But Caleb has enough trouble without adding more to his plate. His house and his choice, Evelyn said. But I appreciate your concern. The words were polite. The tone was the exact calibration of a woman who has been told. Her business is other people's concern one too many times and has run out of patience for soft responses. She walked out. May was waiting on the wagon. She looked at Evelyn with an expression that was about 30% disapproval and 70% something that might have been satisfaction. That wasn't subtle, May said. I know. It'll get back to Harlan Briggs. I know that too. May picked up the reins. Caleb's going to hear about it. Probably. There was a pause. Was it worth it? May asked. Evelyn sat for a moment with the receipt in her pocket and the morning sun on her face and the feeling that had been building in her chest since she'd bent down to pick up those coins off the market floor. The feeling of being tired, all the way down to the bone, of making herself smaller so other people would be comfortable. Ask me in a week, she said. May made a sound that was not quite a laugh, snapped the reins, and they headed back down the road toward the ranch. Caleb heard about it that same afternoon. Orson Pruitt sent word via his delivery boy, not out of malice, but out of the small-town reflex of sharing information with the people it concerned. The note was brief and factual. Mrs. Garfield had asked about Caleb's guest. His guest had responded. The conversation had been brief but notable. Caleb read the note at the kitchen table while Evelyn was working in the accounts room and May was making supper. He sat with it for a while. May came to refill his coffee and looked at him. You read it? She asked. Yeah. You going to say something to her? He looked at the note. What would I say? That's up to you. He put the note down. She wasn't wrong. No, May said. She wasn't. Briggs is going to use it. He was going to use something. Didn't need to be this. Caleb was quiet. Through the wall he could faintly hear the sound of paper being moved.
Evelyn, at the accounts, still working, 2 hours passed when he'd expected her to stop. She had been in there since 7 that morning with one break for lunch, and she had filled half a page with careful columns that he had looked at briefly, not because he could follow all of it, but because the sight of it, the order of it, the clarity, had done something odd to him, made the problem feel like a thing that could be managed rather than a weight that had no shape. He hadn't told her that. He didn't know how. "She's going to make enemies in this town," he said, "on my behalf. She doesn't even know enough about what's at stake here to know what she's getting into." Maybe. May poured her own coffee. Or maybe she knows exactly what she's getting into, and she's been in harder situations and she's doing it anyway. Why? You'd have to ask her. He didn't. Not that night. But he thought about it while he did his last round of the animals before sleep, in the particular quiet of the ranch at 10 o'clock, when the wind had died and the sky had gone dark, and the only sounds were the ordinary sounds of things breathing and settling. He thought about a woman who bent down and picked her coins up off the floor in front of a crowd, who went through someone else's accounts with the same systematic attention she probably brought to her own survival, which was to say, complete. Who stopped in a general store doorway and turned around and met the town's judgment without flinching. He had not seen that kind of steadiness in a long time. He had not let himself notice that kind of steadiness in a long time, which was different. He went to bed and lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and felt the way you feel when something has shifted slightly without your permission, like a door that you were certain was closed has been moved just far enough off the latch that the hinges are showing light. He told himself it didn't mean anything. He had been telling himself things didn't mean anything for years. He was practiced at it. It was May who told Evelyn about the river. Not intentionally. It came out sideways, the way information often comes out when one person knows something and another person is asking questions that are adjacent to it. They were in the kitchen on the 4th morning, and Evelyn had asked May how long Caleb had been alone on the ranch. May had said 8 years, managing alone since the last hand left. Evelyn had asked what made him build out here, this far from town, on land that was clearly difficult. May had said he needed somewhere that required all of him, so he'd have to put it somewhere. Evelyn had asked what she meant, and May had looked at her coffee cup and said, without quite intending to say it, "After he lost Daniel, I don't think he knew what to do with himself that didn't involve working until he couldn't feel his hands." "Daniel," Evelyn said. May looked up. "His younger brother," she said after a pause. 16 years old. They were crossing Ridley Creek together. Caleb was 22, just starting out. They were moving cattle across the ford. Rain had come up fast. She stopped. The current took Daniel. Caleb went in after him and couldn't get to him in time. Evelyn was quiet. "He's never said this to me directly," May said. "He doesn't talk about Daniel, but you learn things, spending enough time with a person in close quarters. You see how they hold themselves near the creek, how they talk about the water when the rains come. What they don't say." Evelyn thought about the cracked window sealed with dried resin, the recently replaced porch steps, the fence posts he checked every morning, the way you check the things you can still hold together. "He blames himself," she said. "Of course he does." May looked at the window. "How is 22? He couldn't have done anything different, but 22-year-olds don't understand the difference between what they could have changed and what was simply going to happen regardless." "Some 40-year-olds don't either," Evelyn said quietly. May looked at her. "No," she said, "some don't." They sat with the weight of that for a moment, the way women sit with things they have both carried. Outside, Noah's voice, high and urgent, came from the direction of the barn. "Mama! Mama! Come quick! Bessie's starting!" Evelyn was out of her chair before she finished thinking about it, and then May was behind her, and they went across the yard at something between a walk and a run, and the morning opened up around them, ordinary and unrepeatable. The foal came in the early afternoon. Noah stayed the entire time, pressed against the stall wall, exactly where Caleb told him to stand, not moving, barely breathing, watching with the focused intensity of someone witnessing something for the first time that they sense they will remember for the rest of their life. Lily came in at some point, without announcement, and stood beside her brother and did not say a word for 40 minutes. It was not a smooth birth. Caleb worked beside the mare with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this before, adjusting, guiding,
speaking to Bessie in a low, constant murmur that seemed to be less about words and more about sound. Just the reassurance of a voice she knew, saying, I'm here, keep going. Evelyn stood near the door and watched all of it, not just the mare. She watched Caleb work and thought about what May had said about a 22-year-old boy who could not save his brother from a river. She watched his hands, which were practiced and careful, and did not hesitate even when things got difficult. And she understood something about him that she had not understood before, that he had become a person who stayed, who did not run from the moments when presence was the only thing that could help, that he had built that into himself, deliberately, the way you build something that you know you'll need because you know what it costs to not have it. When the foal finally came, all legs and confusion, and something that looked like surprise at existing, Noah made a sound that was so purely joy it was almost painful to hear. It's alive, he said. Look, it's alive. They usually are, Lily said, and she said it with the flatness she used as cover, but she was gripping the edge of the stall with both hands and not pretending otherwise. Caleb sat back on his heels and looked at the foal for a moment, and his face did something it hadn't done since Evelyn had arrived. It was not a smile exactly, but it was the thing underneath a smile, the actual feeling that sometimes smiles are built on, when the feeling is too real to perform. Noah turned to Caleb. What are you going to name it? Caleb looked at the foal. Then, for no obvious reason, he looked at Evelyn. Then he looked back at the foal. Haven't decided yet, he said. Noah considered this as an important responsibility. It should be a good name, he said seriously. Names matter. They do, Caleb said. Bessie turned her head and began to clean the foal with the particular focused efficiency of a mother who has been through this before and knows exactly what happens next. And in the stall doorway, Lily let go of the wood with both hands, slowly, and let her arms fall to her sides, and just watched. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Some things didn't need words to mean something, and she was old enough now to know which things those were, even if she was still learning to let herself feel them without immediately building a wall on top. The afternoon light came in low through the barn slats and fell across the hay in long gold lines, and the foal tried its legs for the first time, wobbling with tremendous effort and absolute determination, and outside the ranch went on around them, the dry fields and the struggling fences and the letters from creditors and the town with its opinions, all of it still there, none of it resolved. But here, in this moment, something had been born that hadn't been there before. Evelyn was not naive enough to think that made everything better. She was experienced enough to know it mattered anyway. The letter from Harlan Briggs came on a Tuesday, which was the same day the foal took its first real steps without falling, and Caleb noticed the timing the way a man notices things that arrive together, not as coincidence, but as the universe's particular sense of humor. The letter was longer this time. It was also less polite. Evelyn read it at the kitchen table while Caleb stood by the window with his coffee, and May moved around them both with the careful efficiency of a woman who understood when to be present and when to be invisible. The letter had 5 paragraphs. The first 3 were administrative language about the Cattlemen's Cooperative Association's review process, the standards expected of member ranches, and the timeline for assessment. The 4th paragraph named specific concerns. Caleb's account standing with 2 regional suppliers, his reduced cattle numbers over the previous season, and what the letter called questions regarding the stability of operations at the Dawson Ranch. The 5th paragraph was the one that mattered. It said that the association's quarterly meeting was in 3 weeks. It said that the board would be voting on a restructuring of shared route access. It said that ranches currently under financial review would be excluded from the vote and from route privileges pending the outcome of their assessments. It said, translated from its careful language, "We are moving to cut you out, and we are doing it at the meeting before you can defend yourself." Evelyn set the letter down. 3 weeks, she said. I know. If they vote at the meeting and you're not there, I know, Evelyn. It was the first time he had used her name directly, and the flatness in his voice was not anger at her, but the specific tension of a man who has been watching something approach from a distance and has now run out of distance. She picked the letter up again and read the 4th paragraph a second time. Questions regarding the stability of operations, she said. That's not about your accounts. That's a separate line. What do you mean? The accounts are bad, but they're recoverable. We've been working on that. 2 of the 3 supplier accounts are already addressed. The note payment is documented now. She had gone to Millhaven 2 days after learning about the missing receipts and spoken to the bank directly. It had taken 40 minutes and the particular kind of patience that comes from having very limited options, but she had found the teller, a young man named Perry, who did in fact remember the transaction and had provided a written confirmation. She had that paper in the accounts box now, filed in the correct order. But this line, stability of operations, that's a judgment call. That's Briggs deciding you're not reliable, not because of numbers, but because of something else. Caleb looked at her. Because of you, he said. She met his gaze without flinching. Possibly. He's using it as a reason. Men like Briggs always find a reason, she said. If it wasn't me, it would be something else. The drought, the cattle numbers, the porch steps. Something. She set the letter on the table. The question is whether we give him a better reason to leave you alone. Which would be what? Other people, she said. You mentioned Haskell and Clara Mead. If Briggs is doing this to you, he's doing some version of it to them. If the three of you show up at that meeting together, with your accounts in order and your documentation clear, it's a different conversation than one man walking in alone. Caleb was quiet for a long time. May had stopped pretending to be invisible and was just standing at the counter looking at him. Haskell and I haven't spoken in 2 years, he said. We had a disagreement about the Southwater access. What kind of disagreement? The kind that ends conversations. Who was right? He looked at her. Me. Did he know that? Eventually. Then he owes you a conversation. She stood up. And Clara Mead? I barely know her. Inherited the mead operation when her husband died about 18 months ago. She's been managing it on her own. The town doesn't know what to do with her. Sounds familiar, May said from the counter. Caleb looked at May. May looked back at him with the expression she wore when she was making a point she did not intend to repeat. He picked up his hat from the table and turned it in his hands. I'll ride out to Haskell's this afternoon, he said. I'll come, Evelyn said. You don't need to. I have his account documentation with me. If he's getting a similar letter from Briggs, looking at your accounts alongside his might make the argument faster. She said it practically, without making it into anything more than that. Unless you'd rather I stay. He looked at her for a moment. Be ready by 2, he said, and put his hat on and went out the door. Haskell's ranch was south of Caleb's by about 40 minutes' ride, across ground that got flatter and dustier as it went, the land less stubborn-looking than Caleb's but also less cared for. The house was smaller. A dog barked at the wagon from behind a fence and did not stop for a while. Ellis Haskell came to the door with the expression of a man who has been interrupted in the middle of something he found more appealing than whatever was coming, and then he saw Caleb and his expression shifted through several stages. Caleb, he said. Ellis. They looked at each other with the particular quality of 2 men who have known each other for years and have both decided to be the kind of person who holds a grudge and are both slightly tired of it. This is Evelyn Carter, Caleb said. She's been helping me with the accounts. Haskell looked at Evelyn with the frank assessment of a man who had not been told to expect her and was not certain what category to put her in. Ma'am, he said, without quite committing to a tone. Mr. Haskell, she said. Did you receive a letter from Harlan Briggs in the last week? A beat. Come in, Haskell said. The inside of his house had the particular disorder of a man living alone who has given up on the idea of surfaces being clear. There were stacks of paper on the table and a pair of boots near the fireplace that had been there long enough to become furniture, and 3 coffee cups in various use arranged near the kitchen window. Haskell's letter was nearly identical to Caleb's. Same structure, same careful language, same 5th paragraph that meant the same thing. He had received it 4 days ago. I was going to go to the meeting, he said, on my own. Tell them they had no grounds. Without documentation, Evelyn asked. I know what I owe and what I don't. Knowing it and proving it are different things. Briggs knows that. She looked at his table. May I see your account records? He looked at Caleb. Caleb made a gesture that meant she knows what she's doing without using any words, which was, Evelyn noted, a more complete endorsement than anything he'd said to her directly. Haskell pushed the stack of papers toward her. She went through them in 20 minutes. His situation was different from Caleb's, less complex, fewer accounts, and he had been more careful about receipts. But he had one significant problem. a penalty clause on a feed account that had activated 6 weeks ago and that he appeared to be genuinely unaware of. She showed him the clause. He read it with the expression of a man realizing he has been standing next to a fire for some time. "I didn't see that," he said. "It's in the third page, small font, paragraph 9. She set it flat on the table. "If you pay the penalty now before the meeting, it removes their strongest argument against you. You show up at that meeting with your accounts settled and documented, you're not a man under review. You're a man they tried to come after who had his house in order." Haskell looked at Caleb. "She's your bookkeeper?" he said. "She's staying at the ranch," Caleb said, which was not quite an answer to the question. "He found us at the market," Evelyn said, before it could become something other than what it was. "We needed a place. He had room. I've been managing his accounts as part of staying. That's all." Haskell looked between them. He was not a man of particular subtlety, she could tell, but he wasn't a fool. "What are you proposing?" he asked. "The 3 ranches show up at the meeting together," she said. "Your accounts are documented. Caleb's accounts are documented. Clara Mead's, I haven't seen hers yet, but if she's in the same situation, the same principle applies. You're not 3 separate problems for Briggs to pick off one by one. You're one organized group of ranchers who have every right to be there and the paperwork to prove it." Haskell sat back in his chair. "Clara Mead won't want my help," he said. "We've had words about the northern fence line." "Is that a pattern with you?" Evelyn asked. The corner of Caleb's mouth moved. Haskell looked at Evelyn with the expression of a man who is not accustomed to being spoken to this way by someone he met 20 minutes ago and isn't entirely sure whether to be offended. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" Clara Mead lived on the ridge, which meant 40 minutes in a different direction, and Evelyn and Caleb made the ride the next morning in a quiet that had a different quality than the silences they had shared before. Those had been the silences of strangers managing proximity. This one had the shape of people who had been in each other's company for enough time that silence had stopped being something that needed to be filled. "About halfway there," Caleb said. "You didn't have to come yesterday." "I know." Haskell wasn't. He could have been difficult. "He was a little difficult," she said. "That was fine." A pause. "You're not what I expected," he said. She looked at him. "What did you expect?" "I'm not sure. Someone more, I don't know, temporary." She considered this. "We might still be temporary," she said. "I haven't made any decisions about anything." "I know that." He looked at the road ahead. "I'm not—" He stopped. "You're not what?" she asked. "I'm not trying to make this into something it isn't. You're here, and you're helping, and I'm—" He stopped again. He had the quality of a man who has spent so many years alone that putting things into words has become genuinely difficult, not because he doesn't feel them, but because the muscle has gone weak from disuse. "I'm grateful," he said finally. "That's all." It was not all, and they both knew it, and neither of them said so, and the road went on under the wagon wheels. Clara Mead opened her door with a rifle in her hand, which she lowered when she saw Caleb and which she did not apologize for. She was perhaps 35, with dark hair gone early at the temples, and the kind of eyes that assessed quickly and did not much care what they found. She had a smear of grease on her left forearm that she did not seem to notice, and boots that had been repaired at the toe with leather that did not quite match. "Dawson," she said. "Clara." He nodded at the rifle. "Expecting trouble?" 3 men from Briggs's operation came by yesterday looking at the south boundary. Didn't say why, didn't need to. She leaned the rifle against the doorframe and looked at Evelyn. "Who's this?" "Evelyn Carter. She's been managing his accounts," Evelyn said. "And I'd like to look at yours if you're willing." Clara Mead looked at her for a long moment with the specific expression of a woman who has been underestimated by enough people that she takes nothing at face value. "Come in," she said. Clara's situation was worse than both Caleb's and Haskell's, which was saying something. Her husband had left the books in a state that was not quite fraud, but was in the neighborhood of wishful thinking, and she had been managing it for 18 months without the background to know what she was missing. She was not unintelligent. She was managing the actual ranch operations with the competence of someone who had been paying close attention her whole life. But the accounts had a series of problems layered underneath each other that required time and attention to unpack. Evelyn spent 2 hours at Clara's table. Clara sat across from her and did not pretend to understand everything but asked questions that were specific and sharp. And when Evelyn explained the penalty clause issue, which Clara had, like Haskell, not known about, Clara's expression did not collapse into helplessness. It went somewhere harder. "He knew," she said. "My husband knew this was in the contract." "I can't say that for certain," Evelyn said. "I can." Clara looked at the paper with the small print clause. He liked fine print in other people's contracts, didn't enjoy it in his own. She folded the paper, once precisely. "What's your proposal?" Caleb explained the meeting. The 3 ranches, the documentation. Clara listened with her arms folded and her jaw set. "Briggs has been trying to get this ranch since before my husband died," she said. "He made an offer 3 months into the operation. Fair market," he said. "Low market is what it was." She looked at Caleb. "You think showing up with paperwork is enough?" "I think showing up without it is definitely not enough," Evelyn said. "And showing up alone isn't enough either. But 3 ranches with their accounts in order and a public record of what Briggs has been doing, that's something." "He'll make it personal," Clara said. "He already has. He's put the word around town that I can't manage the place, that I'm running it into the ground." She looked at her hands. "Some of them believe it." "Some of them believed I was just another desperate widow at a market stall," Evelyn said. "People believe what they're told until they see something different." Clara looked at her for a moment. "You've been at Caleb's, what, a week?" "About that. And in a week you've restructured his accounts, made a payment plan, gotten documentation from the bank, ridden out to Haskell, and you're sitting in my kitchen going through 15 months of my husband's accounting disasters." She said this not with admiration, but with a kind of flat assessment. "What do you get out of this?" Evelyn met her eyes. "A table to sit at, and a room for my children, and the feeling that I'm not useless." She said it without performance. "That's enough." Clara was quiet for a moment. "All right," she said. "Tell me what I need to have ready before the meeting." The days between that conversation and the cattlemen's meeting moved the way days move when something is coming, faster than they should, and with a particular quality of light that makes ordinary things feel both ordinary and significant at the same time. Noah named the foal himself, which was not something anyone had asked him to do, but which also nobody stopped. He had been thinking about it with the seriousness he brought to important decisions. And on the 4th morning after the birth, he came to breakfast and announced that the foal's name was Daniel. The table went quiet. May looked at her coffee. Evelyn looked at Caleb. Caleb had gone very still. "Why that name?" he asked. His voice was even. "I don't know," Noah said honestly. "I was watching him this morning and I thought, he's new, like he's just starting, and I wanted him to have a name that meant something." He looked at Caleb with his clear, unself-conscious eyes. "Is it a bad name?" Several seconds passed. "No," Caleb said, "it's not a bad name." "Okay." Noah went back to his breakfast, satisfied, already moving on to other things. "When can I start teaching him stuff? Can horses learn their names?" "They learn sounds," Caleb said. His voice had recovered itself. "With enough time. Then I'll talk to him every day." Noah appeared to find this a reasonable project. He should know his name. After breakfast, Evelyn found Caleb at the fence by the barn, not working, just standing with his hands on the top rail and looking at nothing in particular. She stopped beside him. She did not ask if he was all right because she could see that he was managing something and that managing it required quiet rather than questions. After a while, he said, without looking at her, "How did he know?" "He didn't," she said. "He just knew it felt right." "It does." His jaw moved. "It shouldn't, necessarily, but it does." She looked at the morning field, the pale dry grass, the sky that had been promising rain for weeks without delivering. "He picks things up," she said. "Noah. He sees people clearly, and he doesn't know he's doing it. I've noticed." "It's not always easy," she said, "having someone see you that clearly." He looked at her then. The morning light was flat and honest. "No," he said, "it's not." A pause. "But it's not bad." She held his gaze for a moment, and then she went back to the house, and he turned back to the fence. And neither of them made it into anything more than what it was. But it was more quietly, in the way things become more before anyone is ready to say so. The night before the quarterly meeting, Lily came to find Evelyn in the accounts room. It was late. Noah was asleep. May had gone to bed an hour ago. Caleb was doing his last round of the animals, and Evelyn was going over the documentation packet one final time. 3 ranches, 3 account summaries, the bank confirmation letter from Millhaven, the penalty payment receipts for Haskell and Clara's accounts, and a written timeline of the association's correspondence that she had put together from the letters all 3 ranches had received. She had organized it into a single folder, and she was reading it back to herself, checking each item, because in her experience, the thing that went wrong was always the thing you checked last. Lily sat in the chair across the desk. She did not say anything for a moment. "You're going tomorrow," she said, "to the meeting." "Yes." "With Caleb." "And Ellis Haskell and Clara Mead." Lily looked at the folder. "You've been working on this for a week." "About that." "For them. For people we've known for a week." Evelyn looked up. "Yes." Lily was quiet. She had her arms folded but loosely, which was different from the locked-arm posture she had maintained in the first days. She was in her nightgown and her feet were bare on the wood floor, and she looked for a moment like what she actually was, a 10-year-old girl who was very tired and had been carrying things for a very long time. "Do you like him?" she asked. Evelyn took a breath. "I think he's a good person," she said carefully. "That's not what I asked." "I know." She set the folder down. "Lily, I'm not saying don't." Lily met her eyes, and there was something in her face that was difficult to look at directly. Not anger, but the complicated mix of things that had replaced anger as she'd gotten older. Fear and hope, and the specific exhaustion of a child who has been bracing for impact for so long, she has forgotten what it feels like to stand straight. I need to know if we're staying." Evelyn looked at her daughter. She thought about the honest answer, which was that she did not know. She thought about the comfortable answer, which was to say, yes, of course, everything will be fine, the kind of thing adults say to children when they want to stop the conversation. She thought about what Lily actually needed, which was the truth, even when the truth was incomplete. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I'm not looking for the door." Lily heard the difference. She was precise about language, and she heard the difference between "I don't know if we're staying" and "I'm not looking for the door." She unfolded her arms. "He's not bad," she said, to a point on the desk. "Caleb?" "No," Evelyn said. "He's not. He fixed the fence by the east field. There was a gap I noticed that first morning. Something could have gotten through." She paused. "He fixed it without anyone telling him. That's the kind of person he is." "I know." Lily looked up. "That's what I mean. He notices things and fixes them without being asked." She said it like she was identifying a specific and significant characteristic in a new species. Most people don't do that. Evelyn looked at her daughter and thought about the woman Lily was going to become. This precise, guarded, fierce, and exhausted person who had been through too much too fast and had learned the wrong lessons from it, and the right ones, and was sorting through which was which. "No," she said. "Most people don't." Lily got up. "Okay," she said. "I'm going back to bed." "Okay." She got to the door and stopped. "If the meeting goes wrong tomorrow," she said, "you'll tell me." "Yes." "Not the softened version." "No softened version," Evelyn said. "I promise." Lily nodded once, the precise nod of someone completing a transaction, and went back to bed. Evelyn sat in the quiet room for a moment, with the folder in front of her and the lamp burning low. The morning of the meeting arrived with a sky that looked different. Not dramatically different, not the kind of sky that announces itself. But Caleb noticed it when he went out at 4, and May noticed it when she came to the kitchen at 5, and Evelyn noticed it when she came out at 5:30 to find both of them standing on the porch, looking at the horizon in the particular way of people who have spent enough time with weather to know when something is shifting. "Clouds," May said. "Could be nothing," Caleb said. "Could be," May said. They went inside and had coffee. The ride to Millhaven took an hour, and they went in Caleb's wagon rather than on horseback because Evelyn had the folder and the folder needed to stay dry and clean. Clara Mead met them at the junction road on her own horse, and Ellis Haskell came from the south in his wagon, and the 4 of them made the last 20 minutes of the journey together, not talking much. The Cattlemen's Cooperative meeting was held in Millhaven's largest building, the granary, repurposed on the first Tuesday of every quarter into a gathering space for the 40-odd ranchers and their representatives who made up the county's agricultural backbone. It had long tables and a platform at one end where the board sat, and it smelled permanently of grain dust no matter how many times the floor was swept. Harlan Briggs was already there. Evelyn had not seen him in person before. She had constructed a version of him from his letters, and the actual man was close enough to that version to be unsurprising but specific enough to be notable. I was perhaps 60, with the solid build and easy manner of someone who had been comfortable for long enough that comfort felt like a natural state rather than something he'd had to arrange. He was talking to two other men on the board when Caleb walked in, and he looked over with the expression of a man who expected this and had prepared for it. What he had not prepared for was Clara Meade and Ellis Haskell walking in on either side. His expression shifted briefly before he corrected it. That brief shift was enough. Evelyn saw it. She had learned to watch for it in years of dealing with people who wanted something and were measuring how much resistance stood between them and it. Briggs had expected Caleb alone. Caleb alone was manageable. This was not what he had planned for. The meeting opened with standard business: route schedules, seasonal cattle numbers, maintenance requests for shared water sources. Evelyn sat behind Caleb with the folder on her lap, and she watched the room organize itself in the way rooms organize when something is at stake. Briggs brought the membership review to the floor 40 minutes in, which was earlier than the agenda indicated, which told her he had allies on the board who had agreed to the timing. He spoke for several minutes about the association's standards, about the responsibility of members to maintain financial standing, about the importance of stability in times of hardship. He named no names, but the architecture of his argument pointed at one place. Then Caleb stood up. He was not a man who made speeches. Evelyn had understood this about him. He was a man who said what needed to be said and stopped. He had told her this morning in the wagon that he intended to say three things: that his accounts were in order, that the review was politically motivated, and that he was not alone. He said those three things. Then he set the documentation folder on the table at the front of the room and said that it contained the account records for 3 ranches currently under review, all settled, all documented, along with a written record of the association's correspondence that, when read in sequence, told a story of systematic pressure on smaller operations by the board leadership. The room went quiet in a way that was different from the quiet of earlier. Briggs said, "This is highly irregular." "The irregularity," Caleb said, "is that 3 independent ranches received nearly identical letters within 2 weeks of each other, all using the same specific language, all pointing to the same quarterly meeting. That's not a review. That's a coordinated effort." Someone near the back said, "Let's see the documents." Briggs said that this was not the time. The someone near the back said, "I think it is." He was not alone in thinking so. The room shifted. And it was in that precise moment, when the room shifted and Briggs understood that the weight of it had changed, that everything outside changed too. The sky that had looked different since early morning finally made good on what it had been building toward. And the first rain in 3 seasons came down on the roof of the granary in a wave that stopped the room mid-sentence. Everyone heard it. It was not a drizzle. It was not a promising scattering. It was the full, serious, unmistakable arrival of something that had been withheld for too long. And even inside the building, even in the middle of a political argument that mattered to every person in that room, the sound of it made 40 ranchers fall into a brief, collective silence. Because every person in that room understood what rain meant after 3 dry seasons. It meant the fields might come back. It meant the cattle would have water. It meant the calculation that Briggs had been relying on, that desperate ranchers would do anything to preserve what little they had, might be about to change. Caleb stood at the front of the room and listened to the rain on the roof, and his face did what faces sometimes do when the thing you've been holding out for arrives without warning and you discover you are less prepared for relief than you were for continued difficulty. Clara Meade, in the second row, turned to look at the window. Haskell, beside her, let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for several seasons. Evelyn sat with the folder on her lap and the sound of real rain coming through the roof, and thought about a dry field turning green, about a mare who had known what was coming before the storm showed itself, about a foal named Daniel who was back at the ranch right now, still new, still learning what his legs were for. Briggs tried to regain the floor, but the moment had broken and the room had turned,
and when the man in the back stood up and called for a proper examination of the documents before any vote was held, the majority of hands that went up in support were enough to make the number clear without counting.
3 weeks of careful work laid out on a table. The rain. Neither one alone would have been enough. Together, they were. Caleb looked back at Evelyn from the front of the room, just once, with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not gratitude exactly, and not relief, but something that contained both of those things, and had something else in it too, something less manageable, something he did not yet have words for. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at the empty folder in her hands, because she had learned that some things should not be examined too closely before they are ready. Outside, the rain came down on the parched county like it intended to stay. The rain did not stop after the meeting. It came down through the afternoon and into the evening, and by the time Caleb's wagon made it back to the ranch, the road had gone soft and the ruts were filling with water, and the sky showed no sign of reconsidering. It was not a violent rain, no lightning, no wind worth naming, just the steady, serious kind that soaks into ground rather than running off it, the kind that 3 dry seasons had made almost mythological in people's memories. May was on the porch when they pulled in, and she looked at the sky the way she had looked at it that morning, except that now her expression had changed from watchful to something quieter. "How long?" she asked. "All night, maybe," Caleb said. "Could be 2 days?" May nodded once, like she was receiving a report she had requested. "Children are inside," she said. "Noah has been to the barn 4 times to check on Daniel. I told him 3 times was the limit. He waited 20 minutes and went a 4th time." "Is Daniel all right?" "Daniel is fine. Bessie's fine. Noah is fine, but very wet." She looked at Evelyn. "How did it go?" "They're reviewing the documents," Evelyn said. "The vote on route access was postponed. Briggs didn't get what he came for." May made a sound that was not quite a word. "Good," she said, and went inside. The postponement was not a victory. Evelyn was careful about that, careful not to let it become something bigger than it was. The association board had agreed to a 60-day review period for the documentation, which meant 60 days before they reconvened and voted. In 60 days, things could change. Briggs still had allies on the board. She had counted them during the meeting, 3 men who deferred to him reflexively, 2 more who went quiet when he spoke, which was its own kind of deference. He would use the 60 days, but so would they. She was at the desk the next morning going over the documentation package again, not because anything in it had changed, but because she was a woman who checked her work when Caleb came in and set a cup of coffee on the desk without being asked. She looked up. He sat in the chair across from her, Lily's chair, she had started thinking of it, and looked at the papers. "What else do we need?" he asked. "For the review?" "For all of it." She considered. Letters of support from other association members would help. Not the board, the regular members who were in that room yesterday. If we can get 5 or 6 of them to put their names on a statement saying they've had concerns about the board's conduct, it changes the character of the review. Who would do that? The man in the back who called for the document examination. Who is he? Amos Garrett. His family's been in the county 30 years. He has no particular love for Briggs. Caleb thought about it. There are others. Men who have been quietly elbowed out of decisions for the past 2 years. "Talk to them," she said. "Not as a group, individually, one conversation at a time." She picked up her pencil. People sign things when they feel they're part of a decision. They don't sign when they feel they're being recruited. He looked at her. "There's a difference?" "The difference is whether you let them talk first." He was quiet for a moment. "You learned all of this. Where? From bookkeeping?" "From watching what happens when people feel steamrolled," she said, "which they did in that room for long enough that they were ready to push back. You just gave them the moment to do it." She made a note on the margin of the document. "It's not strategy. It's just, people are tired of being managed. They respond when someone treats them like they have a say." He looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. "I'll ride out to Amos Garrett's this afternoon," he said. "Take the east road. It'll be drier." He got up. "Thank you," he said. She did not look up from the paper, but she said, "Drink your coffee first. It's still raining." He picked up his cup and went to the window, and she heard him there. The sound of him standing, the rain on the glass, the ordinary occupation of a man with a moment before the next task arrived. It was, she thought, a comfortable sound. She did not examine that thought very closely. The creek rose on the second day. It had been a dry channel for so long that the children had walked along the bottom of it without thinking, and May had planted the kitchen garden along its bank because dry creek beds are good soil, and Caleb had stopped thinking of it as a water feature and started thinking of it as a convenient path between the east field and the barn. By mid-morning of the second day it was running. By afternoon it had banks again, actual water moving fast through a channel that had been empty for 2 years, and the sound of it could be heard from the house, which was close enough to the bank to make Evelyn feel the first thin thread of unease without quite knowing why. Noah, of course, wanted to see it. "Not close," Evelyn said. "I just want to look." "You can look from up here." "You can't see it from up here. The bank goes down." "Noah." He stopped. He had learned her tones, all of them, and this one meant a wall he would not get through today. "Okay," he said, and went back to the barn to talk to Daniel. It was Lily who said, quietly, when Noah was out of earshot, "It's because of the river, isn't it? What happened to his brother?" Evelyn looked at her. "May told me," Lily said without apology. "Not the whole story, but enough." "You shouldn't go close to the creek either," Evelyn said. "I know." Lily looked in the direction of the water, though there was nothing to see from where they stood. "Does he ever talk about it?" "Not to me. But you know, May told me." "So neither of you has said anything to him?" Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "It's not my place." Lily looked at her with the specific expression she wore when she thought an adult was wrong, but was choosing not to say so directly, which was its own kind of saying so. "You went through his accounts," Lily said. "You rode out to 2 other ranches. You reorganized his entire financial situation and helped him at the association meeting." She paused. "But you don't think it's your place to know him." "That's different." "Is it?" Lily said, and went back inside. The water was still rising on the third morning. Not catastrophically. The creek was moving fast, but staying within the elevated banks that the rain had carved. But the low field to the east of the ranch had begun to flood at the edges, and Caleb had spent the early morning moving the cattle that pastured there to higher ground. He came back to the house at 9, wet through, and changed his shirt in 3 minutes, and went back out. It was May who noticed the sound change. She was at the kitchen window filling the kettle, and she heard something in the rain that was different. Not the steady fall, but a heavier, harder sound from the direction of the creek, the sound of additional volume arriving fast. She set the kettle down. "Caleb," she said, not loud, but something in her voice brought him back to the kitchen doorway. "What?" "Listen." He listened. He went out the back door without putting on his coat. Evelyn was already at the window. She had heard it too. That change in water sound, the quality of something building, of a creek that had been running hard deciding to run harder. She went out after him. The rain had not let up, and the ground was sodden underfoot, and by the time she reached the edge of the rise above the creek bank, she could see what May had heard. The water was high, higher than it should have been, even for 2 days of good rain, and she understood in a moment that something upstream had released, a blockage somewhere, because the surge was too sudden for natural accumulation. A log jam, maybe, or a temporary dam from debris, and whatever it had been was no longer holding. Caleb was standing at the top of the bank, looking at the water. She saw his hands. They were not still. He had both of them closed tight at his sides, the knuckles showing, and he was very still in his body, but his hands were not still, and she understood suddenly what she was looking at. A man standing at the edge of a creek that looked like the creek that killed his brother, watching it run, doing the arithmetic of whether he could stand to be this close to it. She did not say anything. She stood about 8 feet away from him and looked at the water. After a moment he said, "Something's blocking the south channel. If it goes, the lower field floods completely and takes the new fence line with it. Can you clear it?" "I'd have to go down to the bend." A pause. "The bank's unstable right now." "Then wait," she said. "The fence line isn't worth—" "The lower field is where I've been planning to run the cattle through next spring," he said, flatly. "If the fence goes, I'm looking at 3 weeks of work to repair it, minimum, and I don't have 3 weeks to spare in spring." She understood that he was not arguing with her about the fence. He was arguing with himself about the water. She looked at him. "You don't have to go today," she said. "One day won't decide the fence." "Evelyn?" "I know," she said. "I know you know that. I'm just saying it out loud." He looked at the water for another 10 seconds. Then he looked at her, and his face had the expression she was starting to know. The one where the feeling was there, and he wasn't hiding it exactly, but wasn't offering it either, just letting it exist without making it into a performance. "I hate this creek," he said. It was the simplest thing he had said to her since she had arrived. No management in it, no armor. "I know," she said. They stood there in the rain for another minute, not touching, not saying anything, and then he turned and went back toward the barn to get the tools he'd need. And she stood a moment longer, looking at the water moving fast through the channel, and thought about what Lily had said. "You don't think it's your place to know him," and thought about the distance between helping someone and knowing them, and whether she had been using one as a substitute for the other. Song. Noah was in the barn with Daniel when he heard the sound. He was talking to the foal, which was something he did every morning and sometimes in the afternoon, a running commentary on whatever was in his head. The rain, the things Caleb had taught him about fences, a question he had about whether horses dreamed, the specific way Daniel's ears moved when he made certain sounds. Daniel did not respond in language, but he did orient toward Noah's voice, which Noah had accepted as sufficient conversational engagement. The sound was not the rain. The rain had been constant for 3 days, and he had stopped hearing it as a separate thing. It was just the background, like the creak of the barn or the sound of Bessie moving in her stall. This was something else. It was a human sound, and it came from the direction of the creek, and his body knew it before his mind did. He was on his feet and moving toward the barn door before he had finished processing what it was. He came out into the rain and looked toward the creek bank. Caleb was on the slope below the top of the bank, moving carefully along the edge toward the south bend, with a long-handled tool in his hand. The bank was wet and had given up some of its stability on the lower half, which Caleb appeared to be managing by moving slowly and keeping one hand available. Noah should have gone back inside. This was one of those situations, he had several categories of situation by now, where the right thing was to go find his mother and tell her not to do anything himself. He stood in the barn doorway instead, watching. Because this was also one of those situations where watching was different from not caring. He watched because something in him needed to witness, because he had learned that certain things happen fast, and the only way to hold them afterward was to have been fully present for them. Caleb reached the bend in the creek. Noah could see from his movements that he had found the blockage, a shift in how he was standing, a deliberate engagement with something in the water. He began to work. 3 minutes. 4. The blockage shifted. The sound changed, the water sound, and Noah registered what was about to happen maybe 2 seconds before it happened. The south channel opening, the surge redirecting, the bank below Caleb's feet responding to the additional pressure in the way that wet, saturated ground responds when something changes. It gave. It did not give all at once. It gave on the left, then the right caught, then the left gave again, and Caleb's footing went and he went with it, sideways, not straight down, which was the only thing that kept him from going fully into the creek, because sideways meant into the shallow shelf at the edge, rather than into the main channel. But the main channel was right there, and the current was hard, and he was in water to his waist in a second, and grabbing for the exposed root of something on the bank that held barely, while the water pulled at him with the specific indifference of water that has somewhere to be. Noah was running before he was conscious of it. He heard his own voice, which sounded strange to him, high and sharp, calling Caleb's name, and he came to the top of the bank and looked down, and Caleb was there, holding, still holding, the root in both hands, his face above water, but the bank was soft, and Noah could see that the root was not deeply anchored, that the leverage was wrong, that what was needed was something else to hold on to. He looked around. There was a fence post 10 feet away, not set into this section of bank, but lying horizontally across a maintenance bracket, one of the spare posts Caleb kept staged near the lower field. It was heavy. Noah was small. He got it anyway. He could not carry it. He dragged it, both hands, rain in his eyes, across the wet ground to the top of the bank, and he pushed one end over the edge and down. "Caleb," he said. "Grab it. Caleb." Caleb looked up. He saw the post. He got one hand off the root and reached for it, and the root slipped with the rebalancing, and for 1 second, 1 second that Noah would carry with him for the rest of his life, nothing was holding. Then Caleb's hand closed on the post. Noah sat down hard on the bank, with both hands on the other end of the post. his full weight behind it, his heels dug into the wet ground, and he held on. He was 45 pounds of 7-year-old boy. He was the only anchor available. He held on. It was perhaps 30 seconds before he heard other footsteps. Evelyn, coming fast from the house, and May behind her, and the 30 seconds had the stretched quality of time that moves wrong when something is at stake. Evelyn reached the bank and took the post from behind Noah, adding her weight, and May got down to the water's edge and reached for Caleb's arm, and between the post and May's grip and the easing of the current now that the channel had fully opened, Caleb got his footing back and got up the bank and came over the top of it and sat down in the mud and rain with his back against the fence bracket and his eyes closed. Everyone was breathing. Noah was still holding the post. "You can let go," Evelyn said. He let go. He sat down next to Caleb, close, their shoulders touching, and did not say anything. Caleb opened his eyes and looked at him, and his face was doing something complicated. The aftermath of adrenaline mixing with something older and heavier that the situation had dredged up. "You came running," Caleb said. "I was watching from the barn," Noah said. "I was watching just in case." "That's—" Caleb stopped. His voice had something in it. "You shouldn't have been watching. You should have been inside." "I know," Noah said, "but I was watching anyway." A pause. "The post was good thinking," Caleb said. "You're heavier than I expected," Noah said. Something happened in Caleb's face that was not quite a laugh, but was in the same family. May looked at the two of them and then looked away toward the flooded field with the expression of a woman who has a great deal to say and is choosing not to say any of it right now. Evelyn was looking at Caleb. He was not hurt. Wet, muddy, one hand had a scrape from the root, minor, but she was taking stock in the systematic way she took stock of things, checking, and when she was satisfied, she looked away too. "Inside," she said. "All of you." Lily heard the story from May while Noah and Caleb were changing out of wet clothes, and she heard it in the kitchen with her arms folded and her jaw set. And when May finished, Lily said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "He could have drowned." "He held on," May said. "Noah could have gone in too, trying to help." "He didn't." Lily looked at the floor. "She told him to stay away from the creek," she said. "Noah." "She told him." "Children watch people they care about," May said, without emphasis. "That's not a flaw." Lily looked up at that. She recognized the implication. She let it land without deflecting it. "Is Caleb okay?" she asked. "He's fine." "Is he—" She stopped, reorganized. "Does he— When he was in the water, was it like before? Like with his brother?" May looked at her steadily. "I think so." "Yes." Lily nodded. She went to the window and looked out at the rain. "Somebody should say something to him," she said. "About Daniel, the real Daniel, not the foal." She paused. "Not today, but soon." "That's not an easy conversation." "I know." She said it flatly, the voice of someone with experience. "The easy ones don't need to happen." May was quiet. "He's not our family," Lily said to the window, not to May. "I know that. We're not his either, but—" She stopped. "But?" May said carefully. "But we've been here 3 weeks and I fixed a fence post that was working loose and he came out the next morning and saw it and didn't say anything. He just checked the tension on the wire and moved on." She looked at her hands. "He didn't say thank you. He didn't say anything. He just checked the work. Like I was someone whose work was worth checking." May looked at her for a long moment. "He does that," she said. "He's been doing it for years alone. He checks things. It's how he says he sees you." Lily was quiet with that. "He sees all of us," May said. "He just doesn't know how to tell you." It was Evelyn who knocked on the door of Caleb's room that evening. She had not intended to. She had gone to bed twice, once at 9, lying there until 10, and then again at 10:30 after checking on the children and coming back to find herself standing in the hall with no reason to still be standing there. She knocked twice, quiet. He opened the door in a different shirt, dry, his hair still damp. He looked at her without surprise, as though he had been expecting someone. "Can I come in?" she said. "Yes." His room was spare in the way she had expected. One practical chair, a small table, a lamp. No decoration. The window had a view of the east field, which was dark now and flooded at the edges, but holding. On the table were his work gloves, a folded letter that she recognized as Amos Garrett's response. Amos had agreed to sign the support statement, and a small photograph in a plain wood frame. She looked at the photograph. A young man, perhaps 16. He had Caleb's jaw, lighter eyes, and the particular quality of a person who has not yet learned to be careful with his expression. Everything in his face was just there, open, readable, unguarded. He was laughing at something just off the edge of the picture. "Daniel," she said. "Yes." She looked at the photograph for another moment and then looked at Caleb. "I know what happened," she said. "May told me. Not everything, but enough." She said it straight because she had thought about how she wanted to do this, and she had decided that directness was the only thing that would work with him. "I should have said something sooner. I didn't because I didn't know how, and I was waiting until I had the right words, and I think I've been using the wrong approach." He said nothing. "Today at the creek," she said. "When you went in, I know what it must have. Evelyn, I'm not finished." He stopped. "I know you carry it," she said. "I know you've been carrying it for 20 years, and that it changed the kind of man you decided to become, and that some of the ways it changed you are, you're better for them. You are. But some of them," she stopped, found the word. "Some of them are costing you." The room was quiet, except for the rain. "You came into that market," she said, "and you walked past us twice. May told me. You talked yourself out of it twice and came back a third time. And I've been thinking about those 2 times you walked away, and I think I understand them now in a way I didn't before." She looked at him. "You were afraid. Not of the inconvenience, afraid of caring about something that might go wrong." He looked at the window. "That's a fair assessment," he said. "I'm not saying it as a criticism. I know you're not." His voice was careful, not closed. "I know what I do. I know why I do it." He turned to look at her. "I lost Daniel in a river, and I have not been within 50 feet of fast water since without my whole body remembering it. Today," he stopped. "Today was the first time in 20 years that I went in. I know. I went in because the fence mattered." A pause. "And because I have spent 20 years running from anything that made the water matter, and today it just..." He made a sound that was not quite a word. "I was tired of it, of calculating the safe distance from everything." Evelyn sat down in the chair. "Tell me about him," she said. "Daniel, the real one." He looked at her. "You don't have to," he started. "I know I don't. Tell me anyway." He sat down on the edge of the bed. He looked at the photograph. And then, in the way that some things happen, not dramatically, not with particular preparation, just because it is finally time, he told her. He told her about Daniel, who had been the easier of the 2 brothers, the one people naturally warmed to, who had a talent for finding the absurdity in things, and for reading horses, who had been going to come work the ranch with Caleb when they got older. He told her about the morning of the crossing, the rain that had come up fast, the ford that had looked passable from the bank but wasn't, the current that had taken Daniel sideways and fast, the way Caleb had gone in after him and gotten close enough to see his brother's face and not close enough to reach him. He told her the part he had never told anyone else, that Daniel, in the water, had not been afraid. He had been surprised. And he had looked at Caleb with the open, unguarded face from the photograph and said something that the water took before it arrived. "I don't know what he said," Caleb said. He was not looking at her. "I've thought about it for 20 years. I'll never know." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "He saw you there," she said. "Whatever he said, he saw you there. That's what you know." Caleb looked at the floor. "It wasn't enough." "No," she said. "It wasn't. That's true. And it was also not your fault, and both of those things are true at the same time, and I think you know the second one in your head and you've never been able to let it move to somewhere more permanent." He was quiet for a long time. "You're very direct," he said. "I've been told." "It's not a criticism." She looked at him across the small room, the lamp between them, the rain on the window, the photograph on the table. "My husband died," she said, "and I had 2 children and no money, and I made myself smaller for 2 years because I thought if I took up less space, things would be easier. And they weren't easier. They were just smaller." She paused. "I'm done making myself smaller." "You never seemed small to me," he said, "from the moment at the market." She looked at him. "I know," she said. That's part of why I'm still here. The silence that came after that was different from all the previous silences. It was not filled with what wasn't being said. It was filled with what had just been said, which was enough. He looked at her with the gray eyes that revealed things now, that had stopped being careful. I need to tell you something, he said. All right. When I brought you here, I told myself it was because you needed help, and I had room. And that was true. But I walked past you twice. He looked at his hands. The third time, I was looking at Noah, and I thought, he stopped. What did you think? I thought, that boy is hungry, and he's standing there trying to hold himself together, and if I don't do something about that, I'm going to have to live with it. He paused. Same thought I had 20 years ago, at a river. Except this time I could do something about it. He looked at her. I've been trying to figure out what that means. Whether you were just trying to fix the old thing, she said. Yes. And? He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. Not just that. He said it simply, with no performance around it. Not anymore. Not for a while. Evelyn looked at him. She thought about 11 moves in 2 years. She thought about coins on a dirt floor. She thought about Lily's arm slowly unfolding and Noah's voice high and sharp in the rain and a fence post held by 45 pounds of determined child. She thought about how the account she had built of this man over 3 weeks, item by item, ledger, entry by ledger entry, conversation by conversation, had become something that did not fit in any of the categories she had used to organize her experience of people. I'm not a simple situation, she said. I know. 2 children, no claim, no... I know all of that, he said. I've been knowing all of that since about the second day, and it hasn't changed what I'm telling you. She looked at him for a long moment. We're both bad at this, she said. Yes. It's going to be clumsy. Everything worth doing is. She looked at her hands and then back at him. Okay, she said. He looked at her. Okay, he said. Don't make me repeat it, she said, and there was something at the edge of her mouth that was not quite a smile but meant the same thing. He didn't make her repeat it. Outside the rain kept falling, and in the barn Daniel stood in the straw next to Bessie, and the creek ran high but stayed in its banks, and May lay in her room listening to the rain with the particular satisfaction of a woman who has been waiting patiently for something to happen and can now, finally, sleep. And the ranch held. Not perfectly. Not without the account still needing attention, and the association vote still 60 days away, and the east field flooded, and the south fence line in need of work, and 100 things remaining that would require everything that all of them had. But it held, which was all anything could do, on any given night, in any given rain. The 60 days did not pass quietly. Briggs made 2 more attempts before the reconvened meeting. The first through a proxy letter to the board suggesting that the documentation Evelyn had submitted contained irregularities, which it did not, and which Evelyn addressed in writing with such precise and source detail that the board member who had forwarded the letter did not raise the issue again. The second attempt was more personal. A man came to the ranch one afternoon, presenting himself as an independent land assessor, asking to walk the property. Caleb let him walk. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table while he was there, and when he left she rode to Millhaven and confirmed with the county records office that no independent assessment had been ordered by any official body. She documented that too and added it to the folder. Briggs, it turned out, was a man who relied on people not paying attention. When they paid attention, his options narrowed considerably. By the time the association reconvened, 6 ranchers had signed Amos Garrett's support statement. The board reviewed the documentation for the full 60 days and found nothing to disqualify the 3 ranches under review. The vote on route access passed with the original allocations intact. Harlan Briggs sat at the board table and voted against it and lost. And when the meeting ended, he walked out without speaking to anyone, which was the particular exit of a man who has used up his available maneuvers and knows it. Caleb told Evelyn about it that evening when he came home. He said it in 3 sentences, standing in the kitchen doorway still in his coat. She said, "Good." He said, "That's all?" "That's all," she said. "Sit down." May made stew. He sat down. That was the end of Harlan Briggs in their lives, which was not dramatic but was complete, and completion was worth more than drama in Evelyn's experience. The East Field dried out through October. The fence line that had gone under during the flood required 2 weeks of work, not 3, because Caleb had help. Ellis Haskell sent 2 of his men for 4 days without being asked, which was his way of paying a debt he did not want to name directly. And Caleb accepted the help the same way, without naming it. Men sometimes communicated entirely in gestures, Evelyn had found, and were better at it than they knew. Lily helped with the fence, not because anyone asked her. She appeared on the second morning with gloves on and a wire stretcher she had figured out how to operate from watching, and she worked alongside Caleb's hand, a weathered man named Pete, who had been on the ranch 3 months, and who accepted her presence with the wordless practicality of someone who was not going to turn down help based on age or size. Caleb watched her work from the far end of the line for a while. In the afternoon, when they broke, he said to her, "Your tension's good." Lily looked at the wire. "I did it the way you showed Pete." "Pete's been doing it wrong for 6 weeks. You did it right." She looked at the section she had done, then at Pete's sections, then back at hers. "Oh," she said. "Yeah." She went back to work with the particular expression she wore when she had been given information she was going to use. The fence went up straight and tight, and in the spring when the cattle ran through the east field it held without a problem, because Lily had done her section correctly, and that correctness had pulled Pete's work into alignment alongside it, the way a good standard will. Nobody made a speech about it. That was the right call. Noah did not become less talkative as the months passed. If anything, the ranch gave him more material, which meant more words, which meant longer and more elaborate monologues directed at Daniel, at Bessie, at Pete, at May, at whoever was nearest when something occurred to him. But there was a change in him. It was not a dramatic change. It was the kind of change that you see in a child when something that was held loose becomes settled, when the animal wariness that comes from too much movement and too much uncertainty begins to ease because the ground has stopped shifting. He stopped doing the inventory he had done in every new place, checking the exits, mapping the space, calibrating how much he could unpack before they had to move again. He stopped holding things lightly. He unpacked completely. His things were in the room. His boots were under the bed. His books, 3 of them, worn, moved 11 times, were on the small shelf that Caleb had put up in the east room one afternoon without telling anyone he was going to, and had said nothing about afterward. Evelyn had looked at the shelf for a long time when she first saw it. Then she had put the books on it, in order of size, and gone back to the accounts. The conversation about staying happened in December, which was not where Evelyn had expected it to happen. She had imagined it would be some deliberate moment, a question asked, a decision announced. That was not how it went. They were at the kitchen table after supper, the children already in bed. May gone for the evening to visit a woman in town she had known for 30 years. The lamp was between them, and outside the first hard frost of winter had settled on the fields, which were green now in patches, not fully recovered, but returning, the way things return after long drought when the water finally comes back. Caleb said, "I want to put your name on the deed." Evelyn looked up from the paper she was reading. "That's not necessary," she said. "I didn't say it was necessary." She looked at him. "We're not," she started. "I know what we are," he said, "and I know what this place is becoming, and I think you should have your name on it." He said it with the directness he had learned from her, or maybe had always had, and had stopped suppressing. "Not as a transaction, not as an arrangement, because you've earned it, and because I want you here, and because your children deserve to know this is theirs too." She was quiet for a moment. "You've thought about this," she said, "for about 2 months. And you didn't say anything for 2 months?" "I was figuring out how to say it without it sounding like I was offering you a business deal." She looked at him across the lamp. He looked back, the gray eyes steady, no armor in them. "It doesn't sound like a business deal," she said. "Good. It sounds like you. Is that all right?" She looked at her hands, and then at the room, the kitchen that smelled like coffee and wood smoke, the shelf she could not see from here but knew was there, the rain that had come and the fields that were coming back, and the foal named Daniel who had grown into something strong and certain and unaware of the weight he carried in his name. She thought about a woman who had spent 2 years making herself invisible, moving through other people's spaces as quietly as possible, taking up only the room she was given and never asking for more. She thought about what it had cost. She thought about what she had learned on the other side of it, which was that the only thing more dangerous than needing too much
was believing you deserved too little. Yes, she said. It's all right. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers, just for a moment, not long, because neither of them were people who needed things to be prolonged to be real. Then he picked up his coffee, and she went back to her paper, and the lamp burned between them, and outside the frost settled deeper into the green fields, and it was the most ordinary evening imaginable, which was exactly the point.
In the spring, Lily entered the county riding competition and placed second, which made her furious in a way that was also clearly a form of pride. She argued with Caleb for 20 minutes afterward about whether the judging criteria had been applied consistently, citing specific examples from the course. And Caleb listened to every word, and when she was done, he said, "You're right about the third gate. You'll fix it by next year." She did not say thank you. She went to the barn and practiced the third gate for an hour. And the following year she placed first, and she came home and did not make a speech about it. She just put the ribbon on her shelf next to the books, and that was that. Noah turned 8 in March, and Caleb made him a saddle that fit him properly, built it himself over 3 weeks in the evenings, and said when he gave it to Noah, "A man needs tools that fit." Noah received this information with the gravity it deserved, and did not take the saddle off his horse for approximately 4 consecutive days. Clara Meade came by in April with paperwork for a water-sharing agreement between her operation and Caleb's, a practical arrangement that made sense for both operations given the creek access, and she stayed for dinner, and she and Evelyn sat at the table after the men had gone out and talked for 2 hours about things that were not the paperwork. Clara had a directness that Evelyn recognized as a survival skill worn smooth by time, and they understood each other in the way of people who have navigated the same kind of difficulty from different angles. "You fixed his accounts," Clara said at one point. "He fixed ours first," Evelyn said. "He just didn't know he was doing it." Clara looked at her for a moment. "Fair enough," she said. There is something that people who have survived hard seasons know, that people who have not are sometimes told but cannot quite feel in the same way. It is this: the good thing, when it arrives, rarely arrives the way you imagined it. It does not come with announcement. It does not look the way you pictured it in the long, difficult nights when you were holding on and trying to remember what you were holding on for. It comes as an ordinary morning. It comes as a shelf with 3 books on it. It comes as a 7-year-old boy holding a fence post in the rain, heels dug into the wet ground, refusing to let go. Evelyn Carter had not expected Caleb Dawson. She had not expected the ranch, the accounts, the association, the rain. She had not expected to find, at the bottom of her own capacity to endure, that she was not a person who had survived by making herself small. She was a person who had survived by being competent and clear-eyed and stubbornly, infuriatingly unwilling to stop, and those were not small qualities. They were enormous ones, and they had been there the whole time, waiting for a place where they could be used at full size. Caleb had not expected any of it either. He had expected to lose the ranch slowly, alone, doing the arithmetic of diminishing returns until the numbers ran out. He had expected to spend the rest of his life at a careful distance from everything that could be taken away. He had expected the creek to remain a thing he walked around rather than through. He had not expected a woman who bent down in the mud and picked up her coins with her children watching and stood up afterward with her spine straight and did not look ashamed. That was the thing that had stopped him. Not pity, not obligation, recognition. He had known someone with that kind of stubborn, unperforming dignity once. He had seen it in a 16-year-old face in fast water, surprised but unafraid, and he had spent 20 years trying to be worthy of it. He thought now that he might be getting somewhere. The table that first evening had seated one person for years, Caleb alone, at the worn chair with its forward lean. By the following spring it seated 6 regularly, Caleb and Evelyn, Noah and Lily, May, and whoever happened to be there, Pete, Clara Meade on Fridays, Amos Garrett's wife who had become one of May's projects, Haskell on the occasional Sunday when he was willing to make the ride, and they were willing to put up with his opinions about fence tension. The table was loud some nights, and quiet others, and sometimes supper ran late because someone had a story and nobody wanted to cut it short. The woman who had once stood in a market with 11 cents and nowhere to go sat at the head of that table on the opposite end from Caleb and passed the bread and argued with Lily about the riding competition rules and listened to Noah's comprehensive report on Daniel's weekly progress and drank May's coffee, which was still too strong, had always been too strong, and was exactly right. She had not arrived here looking for this. She had not been rescued. She had kept moving, and kept working, and kept being exactly who she was, even when who she was had seemed like more trouble than it was worth. And eventually, the way things eventually happen when you do not stop, she had arrived at the place where all of it fit. That is not a lesson about patience, though it takes patience. It is not a lesson about hope, though it takes that too. It is a lesson about not making yourself smaller than you are, about the cost of that smallness, which is paid not just by you, but by everyone around you who never gets to know what you are actually capable of, which turns out to be quite a lot. It is a lesson Evelyn Carter learned at 34 on the floor of a market, picking up 5 coins, with her children watching. She learned it in pieces, the way everyone learns everything that matters, and she never forgot it after that.